Good afternoon or good morning, depending on what part of the world you're in. My name is Justin Baxley, and I'm the product manager for the PDI Retail Suite. If you didn't catch one of the 437 messages that Austin put out on the chat there, he's going to be moderating for us. So if you guys have questions throughout the course of this thing, you want to put those in the chat window, and Austin will be passing those to me so that we can answer those at the end of the session. We're here today to talk about PDI Lottery. And as we start to talk about this, we're really going to be talking a lot in the context of PDI Enterprise 8. And as we started walking through that, we really said, we want to get back to some of the root concepts that are sort of important to what PDI has been trying to do for lottery for all the years we've been messing with lottery, but also just kind of focus specifically on some of the cool areas and the things that we can give you in PDI Enterprise 8. So I kind of want to start out today talking specifically just about the nature of the lottery system and the lottery business process. When we start talking about lottery, this is one of the areas that kind of makes me chuckle a little bit. I've never been in the C-store industry working for a retailer, but I've been working for PDI for a number of years. And when I tell people that our company makes business software for fuel wholesalers and convenience stores, often you get this reaction like, well, what do you need software for? I mean, don't they just sell gas and Cheetos? So that kind of reaction I'm sure you've encountered at different points in your business. And lottery is one of those areas where you can kind of chuckle and say, yeah, it's a lot more than gas and Cheetos, and even gas, obviously. Any of us who've ever messed with that know that the fuel industry is a pretty tough one too. But lottery has a lot of really tough challenges that make it more complex and in some ways more difficult overall than normal merchandise. Even start talking about cigarettes, which have some unique qualities. Lottery has even more unique qualities. One of the first ones that we've got to wrestle with is that lottery, probably more than any other merchandise category, has an incredibly low margin. If we talk about one $1 ticket having a 4 to 6 cent margin, depending on where you're at in the world, that's a tough place to be, because if we lose one ticket of shrink, we've got to sell 20 to make up for that, and that's a challenge. Another thing we wrestle with is that lottery is a high theft item. Not only is it small and therefore much easier just to pocket, but you've also got this weird sort of condition where you can psychologically believe that the payoff is going to somehow make up for the risk of stealing this thing, and so that leads people to take them more than other product categories. So this theft mixed with the low margin, that's a scary thing for any merchandise that we're wrestling with. So we sort of have a unique place where we want to look at these in a special way. Additionally, depending on where you're at, you're going to have different accounting requirements. So a lot of states in the United States especially say you don't actually own this inventory until you activate it for sale, or sometimes you get into these modes where they do the stand on one foot and the moon's waxing gibbous, and then you finally settle the ticket. But for the most part, there's at least this weird condition where if it's in my store, it may or may not actually be my inventory yet. Now you folks in Wisconsin have a little bit of a simpler setup. But what we're dealing with here is still a situation where my accounting may not match up with what the inventory that I'm in physical control of. So probably the only other thing that we've got that wrestles with that level of inventory accounting complexity might be when you start talking about scan-based trading or something like that. But we've got some unique conditions here with lottery that we've got to deal with. And finally, as you start to look at that whole big picture, there's this place where you start to say, okay, well, great. How can I maintain control in the midst of all these sort of complex variables that are involved specifically around this lottery inventory? And ultimately what those controls require are a greater and greater degree of cost. Now, an obvious degree of cost is going to show up in the form of labor. So as we start to have our store level employees do more and more to track those books, try and see what's at the end of every shift, what's going on, they're going to take more time, and I'm going to have to be paying someone to take care of that control. But the other cost that we don't always talk about is that as we sort of get our store level employees working more and more to control that inventory, often customer service is going to suffer, especially since we typically try to do these at some kind of shift boundary. I was in a convenience store about 3 or 4 years ago, and I remember actually walking up and everything just being completely shut down because here's 2 or 3 store level employees with a paper notebook walking through the showing ticket number for every single book that's in the dispenser. So there's a double cost there that you want to be sort of cognizant of. Now, as we go into this, then the question is, okay, if this is the problem that we're dealing with, what are the solutions available to us? And for the longest time, what we've been on is this teeter-totter, or seesaw, depending on what you call it in your part of the world, where if we increase control, we're also increasing those costs. And if we want to decrease those costs, that means we have to sacrifice control. So what we've been trying to do with PDI Lottery is we want to get you off the teeter-totter. We want to get you to a place where you can increase your control and decrease the overall cost. We want to reduce the complexity of the processes that are needed to increase the control. We want to decrease the cost around the labor and the customer service that it takes to get to the degree of control that everybody wants. So the big question then is, how do you get to the place where I can increase my control while decreasing my labor, decreasing the complexity of my business processes? The way that we're going to go about doing that, and the way that we have this in play right now in the field for you guys, is we have what we call PDI Lottery. PDI Lottery is a system for tracking book level data, and it's really transactional data in a way that's parallel with, and sometimes really often updated at a much faster pace, really in real time, that's running side by side, or you could almost think of it as underneath your inventory, your daily reporting tracking system. So if you want to think about the key differences there is in the lottery tracking system, you're tracking all those transactions and you're tracking them in real time, as opposed to your daily reporting or your inventory system, which is really thinking in terms of daily data, and it's doing that at the item level. So what do we get out of that? What is it that it's really buying for us to create this second system to track this stuff? Well, the first things first is, remember, we've got two pots of inventory when we talk about lottery for a lot of folks. So the stuff that's come into my store but hasn't been activated for sale, hasn't been invoiced yet, I want to track and control that because that's a risk. But at the same time, I don't necessarily want to put it into inventory. So I need some way, I've either got to sacrifice and just merge all this inventory together in a way that's kind of artificial, or I need a way to keep those two separate. The PDI Lottery book tracking system lets you keep both of those separate. That means that I don't have to necessarily count both pots every single time. It also means that I've got a clear delineation between the stuff that's in my inventory and the stuff that I'm just tracking for control purposes. Another thing that buys us then is that as we start to separate those two pots of inventory, I can count them at different intervals, which is important because that one pot that we call inactive, the stuff that hasn't been activated through your lottery terminal that you don't technically own in inventory, it's also usually segregated into some kind of secured space. So whether that's your back office, whether it's a safe or something like that. So the stuff that's out for sale, I might want to count with a frequency, once a shift or multiple times throughout the course of the day. But if it's all one big pile and I need to sort of see what my collective inventory looks like with all that sort of inactive stuff and the active stuff all in one big pot, then every time I count, I need to really count all of it. But if I can keep them separate, then I can count the inactive stuff when I've got personnel available who have access to the secure space, and I can count the stuff that's out for sale at a more frequent interval. That's going to give me some time savings as well because the for sale pot is usually a little bit smaller. And ultimately, one of the best things about it is because it's not happening at a daily level, we can get real-time insight into overshort information about those books as we start to walk through the course of the day. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a second. Now, as you start to look at this, you may be thinking, okay, that's great, but this sounds like more work. So how are we going to do this while simultaneously managing the labor costs, managing the amount of time that people are working on this? And the key there is the I-205 barcode that's on the back of the lottery tickets. So as we start to talk about any given lottery ticket, you're going to see this long barcode that has the ability to tell us the game, the book, and the ticket. And that means that the lottery tracking system is happening at a book level, so even more granular than the item level. Now we can pass that up to the item level when we start talking about the inventory system and the stuff that's going to be shared between the two. But in the lottery tracking system, we're talking about the book level. And that barcode, since it has all that information encoded in it, we've got some patented technology where we can actually decode that and we can count an entire book with a single scan. That's a pretty exciting thing, and it's hard really to stress how amazing it is without seeing it. Fortunately, Cedric's going to send you guys the video later where we actually do some demonstrations of what that process looks like so you can see how helpful that is. That increases two things. One, it increases the speed at which you can actually do a regular count so that if you wanted to do more counts, you've got the ability and the efficiency to pull that off without adding a lot of labor costs. But the second thing it adds, especially in the Enterprise 8 world where we've really locked it down and said all the data we're going to get is going to come out of that scan, you've now got the ability to ensure a greater degree of accuracy because nobody's having to tell you, this is my showing ticket number. The scanner's doing that for you. So in the same way that in item sales, when we started scanning barcodes to pass the item sales to the point of sale, we got a greater degree of accuracy in what was coming out and actually being sold. We've also got the ability now to get a greater degree of accuracy of the actual ticket number showing without somebody actually having to enter that for us. So that I-205 barcode, that long barcode or the 2D barcode, if you've got those in your state, that's got all the data we need to do this and do it lightning fast. Now, I was talking about this lottery book tracking system and its relationship to inventory, and I just wanted to stress that relationship one more time so you can kind of see how this is working. So on a day-to-day basis, there's all these transactions that we use to manage lottery tickets. So So as they come into our store, we take a book and we receive the book. Now, again, for a lot of states, that doesn't mean we've got an invoice. That just means we've captured the fact that it was physically delivered to our store. So you'll see here in the diagram, it's not actually going to daily reporting. It doesn't necessarily need to go into inventory, but you still want control over it. So we keep that in our book inventory, our book tracking system. The second process that usually happens in the course of life cycle of a book is that it gets activated and put out for sale. At that stage of the process, the PDI Enterprise Lottery system has an ability to activate as well. And at that point, that's when we're going to create the invoice. Creating the invoice is going to get passed to daily reporting, is then going to become part of your inventory. And so now we've got this book that's in our lottery tracking system at a book level and increasing our inventory at the item level for that book sitting over in Enterprise. Subsequently, we'll do things like inactive counts. So if we've got these books that we've received, but we haven't activated them yet, we want to do kind of a, think of it like high school math class roll call, right? So you've got Ben Stein saying, okay, books, what books are present? And he asks for Bueller, and Bueller says, I'm here, right? Or he says, I'm missing. And when he's missing, we get the alert, and we've got the ability to then kind of point out, you know, hey, this book that was supposed to be in your store isn't there, or yes, all the books are there and accounted for. We've also got the ability to do multiple counts throughout the course of the day that aren't necessarily inventory counts. If we remember, if you see that column there that says daily reporting and inventory, it's daily level information. So an inventory count has to be an end of day or beginning of day number. If we wanted to count throughout the course of the day multiple times so that we get that varying degree of control for those time slices within the course of the day, I've got to have some counts that aren't necessarily also end of day or beginning of day counts. So those operational counts can be part of our book tracking system, but not necessarily pass an audit over to the inventory system. But once in a while, I'm going to want to square those two systems up. And I'm going to say, okay, this is what my lottery tracking system says that I have. This is what inventory says that I have. And that's where those inventory counts come along. So they're just like another count, another point of reference that we can key off of for over short, but they also pass an inventory audit over to PDI Enterprise. Now, if you've worked at all with PDI Lottery in the 3.7 world, you'll notice this is pretty simplified. So there was a lot of sort of inferred moments in the 3.7 world where we said, okay, well, the last count, that's also an inventory count. And if you didn't do the last count, then it didn't post an inventory count. We tried to make all that a lot simpler and more explicit in the Enterprise 8 world. So if you do an inventory count, we're going to post an inventory audit. You do an operational count, it's going to live only in that book tracking system. Finally, you've got what's called a return. So I've got product. It's out here for sale, it's either activated or it may be sitting in the safe, and that product may get discontinued by the folks at the Lottery Commission. They may come pick that up and take it away. If it's not in inventory, we can just remove it from the book tracking system so you stop expecting to see it in your daily inactive counts when you go count the safe. If it's already activated, though, it's also in inventory, and we'll go ahead and create a credit request for you, or credit invoice for you to reduce the inventory and pull it out of that lottery tracking system. So you see here that the everyday transactions that we're doing for lottery tracking, they're also certain pieces and parts are also feeding into the inventory system to feed that day level information that we've got. So we've got on the one side that real-time information, the running transaction list. On the other side, we've got sort of the day totals that we're keying off of so that you can see your inventory over in short. For those of you who are in the 3.7 world, I just want to stress also, one of the best things, in my opinion, about the Enterprise 8 world is that we made it very easy to see basically that full running transaction log. So the point at which it came into inventory, every single thing that ever happened to that book, as well as when it finally went out of inventory, either because it got sold out or returned. So I just want to walk through a few timelines, again, to make this kind of clear. So you see here, we've got multiple counts throughout the course of the day. I may have a safe count, so all the stuff that's over in my safe. I may have an inventory count that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis to make sure that my daily inventory is correct. And I may have a shift count that's just sort of an operational check in the afternoon or evening to kind of compress those time frames that I can look at for over and short. Now, in the course of that, you'll notice I only have to do that shift count once a day. So the stuff that's sort of locked away, it can stay locked away, and when the manager comes in and they've got access to that space, they can count it and make sure nothing left that space that wasn't supposed to. Or at least if it did leave that space, it was activated and accounted for. From there, I can also do multiple counts of the stuff that I'm actually selling. So as I go through the course of the day and I'm selling and I'm selling and I'm selling, the inventory points are changing throughout the course of the day, and I can take little snapshots of what that inventory looks like at a given time. Now, I stressed that I205 barcode earlier. That's really critical because if it takes me less than 2 minutes to do a quick scan count, then all of a sudden I could do 3 or 4 and it not eat into too much into my labor, right? So a lot of folks are already spending a good chunk of time doing paper-based counts and things like that. So doing more counts throughout the course of the day would be pretty onerous. But if you can pull the trigger and count an entire book, that means that it's a lot easier to do more frequent counts throughout the course of the day, taking little snapshots as you go. Now, once we get those little snapshots throughout the course of the day, the next thing that we can do is we can look over at PDI Market Basket. PDI Market Basket knows what you sold and at what time of day that you actually sold it. So that's kind of a cool place to be, because if I know what you had at 9 a.m. and I know what you have at 3 p.m. and I know what Market Basket says you sold between there, I can tell you what you ought to have had at 3 p.m. and compare that to what you said you had at 3 p.m. That means any point in the day you can get real-time inventory over and short for these lottery tickets. And that's a pretty exciting piece of intelligence. If you know that you took a count at 9 a.m., you also know that they can't fabricate the data because they had to scan a barcode to decode it and get the count there. You did another count at 3 p.m., and you know that you're 2 tickets short then. Now you've got this time frame. It's not, I was short X amount of tickets in a day. I know now I was X amount of tickets short between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. That really is going to compress the amount of DVR that your loss prevention folks have to watch. It's going to make it a lot easier to kind of nail down exactly what may have happened to those tickets. Now you'll see here, this is kind of an example. All of that then is getting fed into really an exception management system. We don't want folks looking at every single count and every single book and trying to figure out exactly what they should be worried about and shouldn't. We're going to find specific pieces of variance, and those pieces of variance we're then going to expose to the managers, and we're going to give you some ability to do some reporting and alerting to the folks who are in supervisory positions. Now, for the home office folks, one of the questions that comes up a lot is, so, okay, great, how do I make sure that they're actually capturing the data and that something's not sort of living in the shadows over here that they can work with that I don't see through the enterprise system that you've given me all this visibility into? And there's 2 key ways that we've traditionally done that. One is that every delivery that we get, even though he's only in the book tracking system, we can also pass over to item reconciliation a combination of book and game. So we know exactly every game book combination that's ever come into the store. A lot of lottery commissions also have different files that you can get, and it's going to vary by state and vary by the government regulations that you're working with, but you can often get a file that says, hey, these are the games and books that we delivered into your stores. If you're in a state that that's accessible, we can import those on the other side of the IR transaction, do the reconciliation, and make sure that everything that came to the store was actually recorded through the system. Now on the other side, there's a piece that says, okay, well, they can't really do anything with those books until they activate them on the terminal, so how do I make sure that nobody activates them on the terminal and walks off with them without recording that as part of my invoicing and my lottery tracking over here? Well, the first one we already talked about, which is anything that's in your safe needs to be accounted for on a regular basis, right? So they've got to actually scan and prove that they've seen that book that's supposed to be sitting in the safe. The other side is that as they activate it, obviously you're going to have a settlement process going through your lottery commission. Eventually, for most people, that turns into an EFT sweep. And those EFTs, a lot of commissions will also provide a file that says, hey, here are the EFTs that we have available. We can bring those into statement reconciliation in APVR, the vendor reconciliation process, and say, hey, here's all the EFTs that have been swept out of your account. So these are the ones that the lottery commission said, I know that you guys activated enough that I'm going to collect my money for it. We can bring all the invoices out of DR, match those up then with the invoices that are coming from your EFTs, or match those up with the EFTs rather, and reconcile that everything that the lottery commission's charging you for has been properly activated and tracked in the system as well. So that reconciliation piece is there. I will say that all government overarching oversight folks are equal, but some are more equal than others. Some folks provide some really clean, very obvious files. Some folks have a little bit more challenging files that we kind of work through to get those import processes built. If that's something you're interested in, we're definitely willing to work with you guys to get those things set up. So just kind of want to recap again everything, the key points of what we've talked about. The first one is just that we can count a single book with the pull of a trigger. So again, Cedric's going to send you a video, and watching that is worth a million words that I could speak today to see exactly how fast we can count a given book. The second thing is that once we've got those counts spread throughout the course of the day, we can take real-time sales from Market Basket, combine those with those real-time counts we did, and basically present you with real-time over and short. So you can find the over and short faster and have a shorter time frame to look at to kind of research what happened there. The other thing is we've got all the ability then to take those exception conditions and expose the exceptions so you can manage by exception rather than trying to sort through all the massive amount of data out there and find the conditions you should be worried about. We didn't talk about this too much, but I wanted to mention it because I know it's of interest to a lot of folks. The other thing we did with Enterprise 8 was we built in a very no-hassle way to manage vending. Vending is a little bit more complex situation. There's obviously a lot of physical separation between the tickets for sale on the counter and the tickets for sale in the vending machine. The other thing that you're wrestling with is not all vending machines can be opened up very easily to count the stuff that's inside the machine. Given that, we've got some structures basically through some automatic creation of transfers to separate that inventory out and manage it with the most efficient sort of labor model given the amount of control we can actually achieve with that machine. And finally, ultimately, we've got all that data feeding into the enterprise system and all the robust reconciliation tools you've got for APVR, so the vendor reconciliation piece for EFTs, or for IR, so item reconciliation of any two things that we'd want to match together. All of those tools come together to help you get more control over that. So that's just kind of a recap of some of the high-level concepts. Obviously, you guys may have some very specific questions. So Austin should have been collecting anything up that we wanted to talk about as a group. And any new questions you may have, you may go ahead and put those into the chat window as well. One of the questions that's sort of out here on the floor is, we've been talking a lot about states. What about if I'm in Canadian province? Where's that fit in things? Right now, we have not actually exercised this in Canada yet. All the initial research suggests that we ought to be able to do this for scratch-off tickets in Canada as well. If you are in Canada and you're interested in chasing this, what I need from you and what would help us move forward with that is if you could get me some samples of some specific tickets so we can actually start to look at the data that's available there and start talking through what that might look like for your specific region in Canada. So the question is there a way somebody can indicate that they're the person actually doing the count? We actually do have that data available, so in the same way that the audits have traditionally let the auditor determine who's doing the count, we carried that forward into Enterprise 8 so that even the lottery counts now, you specify who it is that's actually doing the count. So the question is which states are covered? What I would say to that question is every state that has the ability to feed that data through to us through that I-205 barcode, we've got those covered. That should be almost every single state that has lottery except for maybe one or two, like I think Delaware is one that doesn't actually have an encoded barcode for you. So that's one that as we start to sort of move forward, if you're in Delaware and you want to talk about Delaware, get a hold of us. But almost every other state that has that encoded barcode on it, that has that game, book, and ticket, we can do it there. In those contexts, what I would say is that one of the things we did in Enterprise 8 is that we preloaded the vendor information for as many states as we could get information from you guys on. And I think that number is sitting somewhere around 32 states right now. Any states that you're in that aren't pre-set up, all it would take is for you to get us the information, some high-resolution scans of the back of the tickets and things like that, and we can get them set up immediately. And you won't have to worry about with any of the setup around those scan masks. Most of you, though, are going to be in states where you can basically hit a button that says Load State Defaults. It'll plug in all the information for you to get running without having to understand anything about how those masks work or the barcodes work. The question is, if we've got a book that's partial, it's been sold, it's been activated, and we're returning part of the book, can those be scanned and turned to merchandise receiving as well? Absolutely. So if a book has been activated, one of the things that we'll do is as they return it, we actually capture that showing ticket number again so that we can determine the number of tickets, and we use that then to create a credit invoice. So if you're inactive and you're sitting in the safe, we'll pull you out of the tracking system, but there's no credit invoice necessary because you've never been put in inventory. For anything that's ever been in inventory, we're going to actually back that inventory out through a credit invoice. So the question came up, what about pull tab tickets? Probably worth an offline conversation about the pull tab tickets. Everything we've seen about the pull tab tickets, they should work. But we just need a little bit more information about the kind of data that's actually stored on those and how they're received, how they're settled, etc. So the question is this only with Enterprise 8 and is Market Basket required? If you're in Enterprise 7 or below and you're using PDI Store Assistant, there is a lottery tracking module. We do have folks who've implemented that as recently as this year. Obviously, we did a lot in Enterprise 8 to make it easier to use, make it more resilient against the kind of mistakes a store level folks may make. Everything we did in Enterprise 8 we wanted to make better. So I'm of course going to urge you to say try and get to Enterprise 8 as soon as you can and take advantage of it there. If you're in Store Assistant 3.7 and you're in Enterprise 7 or below, you can still do it and we're happy to talk to you about it. You may just want to make sure you're taking into account when you plan to get to Enterprise 8. Remember, Enterprise 8 is just another upgrade. It's not like you've got to do a major upgrade there to get there. The thing I would say there too, the Market Basket stuff is part of the inventory management system in Enterprise. So as we start to use the new handheld, as you start to use the new web client, anytime we want POS data at a transaction journal level, we're going to ask Market Basket for it rather than trying to pull it on the spot. If you're in 3.7 and you want to use these features, it's actually going to do a poll locally, and it's going to pull that data out locally first. So the question is, what happens to a full book that is not activated at all? If the full book's not activated, you've never invoiced it, so it's not in inventory. Inventory doesn't need to be reduced by that amount. Your payables never been increased by that amount, so you don't need to bring that out of payables either. So the trick there is that it's living exclusively in inventory tracking, or in the lottery tracking. And so all we've really got to do is indicate that it's been removed out of inventory, or out of that lottery tracking. Now, if on the flip side you've got a full book and it's been activated for sale, but nothing's ever sold out of it, then we can create a credit invoice for the entire book, and there's nothing that'll stop us from doing that. And that second case where it's been activated and you're returning the whole book, that's going to be probably what you run into if you're in a state like Wisconsin that requires activation immediately on receipt. So the question is, can we actually use this technology in conjunction with lottery vendors that do EDI? And absolutely, that's part of where that reconciliation piece comes in. So as we get sort of the EFT sweeps, as we get the data about commissions and all that sort of stuff in the EDI files, we're going to bring those into reconciliation so we can start to pair those up. Now what you will see potentially is that obviously we're working at a scratch-off level, talking about things like individual books being activated and settled out. There's going to be some stuff like commissions that may or may not actually be coming through your DR system. In those cases, sometimes what will happen, depending on your state's files and how those things work, we'll actually pull out of the file and bring an invoice in out of that file, as well as the reconciliation information for vendor reconciliation. So we can work with EDI files. It really depends on your state exactly which file sets we may work with. We've seen some states that'll have EDI files and XML files, some that'll have EDI only. We just got to work with that basically to get it into the reconciliation side. So the question is the lottery book tracking system part of the store inventory? And that question is really, in most cases, yes. But the lottery book tracking system is kind of, if you want to think about it, it's a system where you're tracking every single transaction, and some of those transactions affect inventory. So for example, an activation is basically an invoice. It's going to increase your item level inventory for those books. It's going to increase your payables. It's going to feed into daily reporting first, and then from there be updated through the standard DR update process to make it into inventory. Other transactions, like an operational count, don't necessarily actually have to touch inventory at all, right? So if we're just doing a count in the afternoon at 3 o'clock to check on what the second shift looks like, that doesn't have to touch anything in your PDI Enterprise inventory system. It's just going to be something there for us to track sort of that real-time change in what's going on with your individual games and books at the store level, so we can find those over and shorts. Now, I have had people ask me before, well, could I do all this lottery subsystem, the lottery book tracking system, and not have any of it feed into inventory, and not have, and basically have my third-party team come through and count inventory? Technically possible, but it's not something we've seen anybody do. Now, the other way that this question sometimes gets applied is because folks say, well, hey, we treat lottery as cash, and so if we have a shortage, it shows up as cash shortage. This is a complete paradigm shift in that regard. So we are saying individual tickets are inventoried items. Sales go out as item sales. And when we find over and short, we find it as an inventory over and short, not as a cash over short. So it does require things like we're going to scan every single individual ticket when they go out the point of sale. We are going to actually count them. We're going to post audits, things like that. So that's part of what we're after here, is a little bit of a paradigm shift where we say, hey, we used to find shortages in lottery as cash. We're really shifting gears and thinking of it more as inventory and making it easier to treat it that way. We are having 2 hands-on classes about all this lottery stuff. So if you're interested in lottery and lottery processing, you want to get into more details about how the vending works, you want to see more exactly about how these transactions work at the store level, Austin and Matt Avery are going to be teaching some classes on that stuff when you guys get to Users Conference, if you're going to be there. How do we deal with missing tickets? How do we account for missing tickets? In those cases, so say somebody loaded a book backwards and sold some and then flipped it over, they are going to show up as shortages. Now, what you're probably going to see from an inventory perspective is that you would have probably seen an overage at some point and a shortage later. In the book tracking system, what you will see, however, is that you can actually get in and see the full range of transactions that ever happened to this book. So in the event that you see a ticket and it's missing, but you're wondering if it's actually missing, you can actually walk through the full process. So if somebody did actually sell out part of it, you would see that the book was flipped around. Now, we've got some ability too, though, to see those events as well. So if you choose to sell either direction, or you're selling in one direction and you have to flip those things around, we can actually identify the flip events. It's one of the things we did in 8 that wasn't in 3.7, is a very, very clear selling direction marker on every single transaction. So the question came up about auto activation. So it's still sitting in the safe, but it's getting settled. One of the things that we actually is sort of, you get through that first layer of what are our objectives. We want to have more control over this inventory. We want to reduce the labor it takes to control it. Well, one of the other layers is that we see lots of people with safes with way more books than they're ever going to sell, and nobody even knows that all those things are there because there's a lot of, it's not a traditional ordering process. One of the things that this gives us is now at the home office, you have full insight to the number of books you have sitting just in the safe. So really from a best practice perspective, one of the things that we're pursuing is that as folks use this tool, they can see into the safe to see those books that have been sitting there for a certain amount of time. We've been talking about a report, it's not been built yet, but one of those is identifying any books that have been sitting in the safe for X amount of time after delivery. So it's not going to auto-activate for that. Part of the reason why we didn't do that is because the kinds of rules that you guys have in different states for what an auto-activation looks like can get really crazy. I mean, it really is to that degree of stand on one foot and the moon's waxing gibbous, the planets align over, you know, Virgo or some kind of craziness like that sometimes. And it's not always that complex, but it can get pretty tough when you start talking about if it sits in this safe for this amount of time and the remaining books in your store have this many sellers out of them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So our goal is, how do we keep this simple for the folks who have to wrestle with this? Part of that's about managing your inventory so that you don't have stuff sitting there for 45 days that isn't actually selling. If it's not selling enough for you to replace the stuff on the bin, then it really doesn't make sense that it's sitting in your safe either. So what happens if we pull out multiples, we tear those guys, and then all of a sudden we tear off a middle one or something like that? What you would probably see is that you'd see kind of a bounce at some point. So you're going to see that you think you have more at some point than you actually do. You're going to see it kind of bounce through that. Those things not going to be necessarily perfectly tracked. There's not, obviously there's still a few opportunities where some weird things could happen that you're going to see some activity and you kind of scratch your head and wonder about. What you will see is that you have the ability to track exactly what the numbers were captured at every point, so you can see at what point something odd happened. And obviously in some cases you may have some overages, and overages are not really going to make sense either, but as long as those are offset by those shortages, we've got the ability to see that something odd may have happened in the timing, as opposed to getting into a spot where we say, okay, we just had a shortage and a shortage and a shortage, which is going to be more indicative that something shady's happening. So the question is, well, what about the safe counts? How frequently do I need to do those? One of the things that we shifted gears on between 3.7 and the Enterprise 8 world is we said, we want this to just act like a normal merchandise audit. So if you want to do it on the fly, you can do it on the fly. If you want to do it on a schedule, we're going to give you tools to schedule it. And the schedules actually work very similarly to an Outlook schedule. So if you want to say every other day, or if you want to say on these days of the week, you want to say once a week, you can do that sort of thing there. We do recommend that you try and keep a safe count to at least once a week, just because obviously that's a control point and it's not a terribly time-consuming process, but you don't have to do it necessarily every single day. So the question is, what about forms? So how do we get data from this system into forms? Well, some of that obviously, as we start to talk about certain information like cash paid outs and things like that, those will still have to be entered. As you sort of feed things into things like audits, those audits, the audit totals and things like that, there's obviously audit adjustments that can feed into data IDs and different stuff like that we can use. But I would have to know exactly what specific information you're looking at to try and get into the forms. One of the objectives here obviously is to get away from a lot of manual entry and get to a place where you can see at an item level what's happening. Anything as far as cash totals or cash paid outs or that sort of thing, to the extent we can pull them from the point of sale, we will. Anything that still needs to be entered may still have to be entered in the forms for overall kind of cash balancing kind of purposes. So the question came up, says, what about Powerball, Lotto, what we call draw games sometimes? Draw games are one area where you're still really going to be talking about entering stuff into forms. So our purpose here is to track the scratchers, which obviously have a lot of movement, a lot of sort of basically physical inventory to try and keep track of. So the goal here is to make sure we got a firm handle on that. As far as entering total sales for Lotto or terminal sales, online sales, that kind of stuff, those will still probably be handled through your forms. So the question is there a required version for PDI Store Assistant? In the broadest sense, if you're on a supported version, there is a manifestation of lottery in it. So there is a 3.7 version of lottery tracking, and there is basically since 3.402. So if you're on a version past 3.402, then there's probably some kind of lottery. Now, some of the stuff I've been mentioning today is specific to the Enterprise 8 version. So you would actually be shifting out of the old Store Assistant 3.7 into the Enterprise 8 handheld and the new web client there. But there is lottery tracking both in Enterprise 7 and Store Assistant 3.7, as well as the Enterprise 8 versions. So the question says, if we got a book and it's been sold out completely, how do we know that we've actually sold it out as opposed to it looking like we're missing it? One of the things that we do is we actually identify anything that the store level doesn't count. Obviously, you can't scan something that's not there. So in the course of counting it, we know what all's been activated, we know what should be counted, and as we're scanning through the process, if all of a sudden we hit a gap and that book is gone, we've got the ability to say this appears to be sold out. So for active books, we always identify them as sold out. Now, that sold out is compared to what the point of sale said that you should have sold for that particular game. And so if it was gone and somebody said it was sold out, it's still going to show the shortage in the same way as if it was gone and somebody actually took it, right? So from our perspective, we give them the chance to mark an entire book as sold out, even if it's not present to scan. The impact on that sort of over-short evaluation is just that the book is gone, and there should be corresponding sales coming from the point of sale that we would see, and it shouldn't show as a shortage. If those corresponding sales aren't there in the journals, then we would see it as a shortage. So the question is, can we use this for ordering new books since we know what's actually in the safe? There's not a suggested order process, but there is most definitely an ability for a store-level person to pull up what we call lottery inquiry. And in lottery inquiry, I could say limit just down to the books that I've got in my safe, and then you've got all kinds of the same grid level filters that we've traditionally had. If you want to say, hey, do I need to order any, lucky bucks? Do I need to order any of this like 30-point buck or whatever else kind of goofy name they've got on it? You can actually look and see exactly how many you've got sitting in your safe and make a choice about whether or not it makes sense for you to actually move forward with that. Since you can also show the sold out ones, then it does give you some ability to say too, okay, well, how many of these have we sold out and how often do we sell out? So there's some intelligence there that they can use for ordering, but currently no suggested ordering in that context. So the question is, how does point of sale scanning work given that we're tracking at the individual game level what those sales look like? So what I would say is, if you want to do a quantity multiplier, you can still do that if it's the same game. The shift would be that just like you need to sell a Diet Coke different from a Coke, you'd want to track that you scanned this many of the Lucky Bucks and this many of the Mad Money or whatever else it's going to be called. So you could say, here's a Lucky Bucks and I got 5 of those. You could say, here's a Mad Money and I got 2 of those, but you wouldn't say, here's a Lucky Bucks and it's a $1 ticket, so all these other $1 tickets, there's just 12 of them. You wouldn't do that. You'd want to get the granularity by at least game at the point of sale. It looks like that's the end of the questions we got available right now. What I just want to say one more time is appreciate your time. I know this is a chunk of your day that you've chosen to spend with us to learn about something that we're doing and that we're excited about. If you have any other questions that come up, feel free to email us. Also, there'll be a little bit of additional information coming out to you guys, including that video that demonstrates the actual operation of the software. So hope you have a great day. Take care of yourselves.